Hello, everyone. Good morning. Um, so today we're going to talk about driving efficiency with cost-effective authentication. What I'm going to do is overview about the product that Swivel Secure now presents, um, and essentially how you can implement this and how you can leverage on the product. Now, we'll start by making an overview on the solution. So Swivel Secure has a dual core solution, which is essentially one authentication core, which is responsible for everything which is controlling authentication. So this is the core that actually presents you with two-factor or essentially a factor of authentication challenge, gets the reply, and essentially then allows you, as you reply to it, it will judge the authentication as being valid or not. So this is the main core of authentication that we classically always had. Now we recently added another core to this, and so they now work in tandem with each other. Now this new core, it's what I call the single sign-on risk-based adaptive technology core. Now I'm not much of a fan of single sign-on, being a security freak, so typically the user likes single sign-on because it's easy. You access one entry point, you get 20 for free. The problem is that as a hacker, if you hack one entry point, you get 20 for free. So I'm not a fan of single sign-on per se. However, we didn't do single sign-on per se. What we added was a risk-based engine, and that's why we call this the single sign-on, the risk-based adaptive technology engine. And so what it does is bring some sense and some logic into single sign-on by scrutinizing each and every hoop that you make from entry point to entry point, and then deciding if it should or not allowing it through, and then single sign-on, or if it should stop you and require you authentication, in which case it will delegate in its twin brother that you have here and you've always known. So essentially, this then brings some advanced risk evaluation over what we've classically allowed as a product. Now, we all know that the product is pretty flexible. This allows you to have entry points such as VPN, web pages or applications, cloud solutions, or even your desktop protected in terms of entry point by using several different devices such as SMS, mobile app, tokens, telephone, browser, and biometrics too. Now, there's a very warm light that shines over the API, which I'm not gonna touch right now. I'm gonna use this a little bit later, because essentially I'll just overview how flexible and simple the licensing model is. So first of all, unlike some vendors, which will require you to have a license per entry point, Swivel Secure has a flexible user license. So the licensing method is per user, not per entry point, meaning that it's pretty easy for any company that makes an investment, for instance, on the VPN side, because they need the outside perimeter to be defended. Makes perfect sense. But then there's nothing not allowing you to leverage on that through, for instance, your desktop authentication or the cloud authentication or web, because the license allows you that. You license users, you don't license entry points. Another thing is the model itself. So it's a very flexible and flat licensing model. So there is no gold license or silver license or platinum license. What you have is one license per user, and you're entitled to all the features available from the appliance side. This type of licensing, if you're talking on premises, is by definition perpetual, which means that you buy the licenses are yours. You don't have to rebuy those licenses in 2 years' time, unlike most vendors, and hold ransom essentially into the licensing model. In this case, you buy it, it's yours, and as such, what you pay yearly is the support. But that's essentially the ability to call Swivel Secure and escalate tickets if you have any issues. And then there's also the free mobile token, which is another differentiator. We didn't build the business around selling tokens, unlike the majority of our competitors. We built them around selling licenses, which is what we do, software. Now, the tokens for us are an accessory. Yes, we do have tokens. Yes, you can buy tokens from us. Or you could say, no, I don't want any tokens. I want this a little bit more agile, so I'm going to use mobile apps. In which case, any vendor would make you pay for the mobile app because you're removing money from the deal. In our case, there's no problem whatsoever. We just won't sell you the tokens, and you can use the mobile app for free. They use the mobile app will chain to your server and use the same licensing that you've always used for other methods of authentication, for instance. So this then shines that very warm light I told you about over the API, because unlike the vendors, the API is free, meaning that you can do and extend the integration within your own product. So we have customers, for instance, that have workflows that support payment methods, and those workflows are supported by API calls, which make that if someone, for instance, is, let's say, allowing a payment or approving a payment for over £5,000, that payment would go through a typical API scenario, and the user would have to, as it approves, it will have to identify itself by using two-factor authentication. You can integrate that within your workflow because the API is rather easy to use, simple to use, and the license allows you to. Now, in terms of integrations, typically, if you have Radius or API integration, you throw the request directly to the old core. And if you have SAML and ADFS, which is more web-like integrations, you throw them against the single sign-on risk-based authentication core. But this is more or less the overview technologically over the product today. Now, let's talk a little bit about the authentication core and all the methods it allows you. So as you see here, this is sort of a table of levels of security and solutions for those levels of security that we have implemented over the years. And there's a tiny bit more than we see here because there are so many methods. If I was to show them on one slide, we really wouldn't have any space left. But essentially, what you have here is, for instance, a level 1 system, which is easy to use. It's not the safest method, but it's the easiest method. And then we grow in complexity and security, obviously, till level 5, where essentially it's actually talking already about MFA. Now, talking about level 1 is the push, okay? So essentially what you do is you use the mobile app, and the mobile app receives a push message from the server to request the verification of authentication. Essentially, it pops an on-screen message saying you're trying to enter this entry point. Is it true, yes or no? If you click yes, you authenticate. If you click no, you fail. Very simple. Now, a lot of customers are going to tell us this is really nice, but I have a call center. And as such, I'm not allowing my users through with a push. I'm allowing my users through with a phone call to, for instance, a desk phone, which doesn't have Android. So how's this going to happen? Because they can't use their mobile device, their phone, within the call center facilities. Then in that case, we can also implement a connection with Nextmost SIP. So if you have a Nextmost SIP account, we can link the core to the Nextmost core, and essentially it will trigger a phone call to a desk phone, to an old phone, and then request a DTMF reply. So typically you would hear a voice saying, to authenticate, press the proper number. And the proper number would be, for instance, 5, because you decided it's 5, or you decided it's 7. And then obviously the user would have to reply 7 if it was a affirmative reply. So this is the push, the easiest possible method to authenticate users. Then we also have level 2. So what is level 2? Level 2 defines the entire authentication market out there. It is tokens, so they can be sent via SMS, typically the ones that you get while transferring money using your internet banking, for instance. You can also use the mobile app, and in our case, it has 2 methods. So it can have 99 tokens cached within the system, and then you use those tokens and you run out of tokens, you request a refresh of the tokens, and the system connects to the server and grabs 99 tokens fresh for you to use again. Another option is to use Auth, in which case the app just calculates a new number every 60 seconds, and as such, it never needs to connect to the server. So it's a full offline method. Then we also have physical tokens. Again, we are the leader in tokenless authentication, but that doesn't mean we're blind to other methods. Obviously, we implemented tokens for DoD, actually, sort of installations. So DoD has a sort of a specification for certified installations, and we have some customers working with that. They need tokens, so we implemented those, and obviously we now supply them as a standard. And those tokens could be the typical key fob token, or they could be the smart and intelligent credit card token that we now have today. It's the same sort of technology, it's just a different form factor. And with the credit card token, though it was designed for the banking industry, it actually has been changed over the years because a lot of non-banking businesses rather use this as the employee card other than a normal employee card. So there you go, another option. And we also have the SIP integration with Nextmo that I told you earlier on, which can be used pretty much like a token over the phone. So you get a phone call, and the phone call is going to say, your token is 37891, that sort of stuff. And so, yes, we do level 2 in tokens pretty much like everyone else out there does. So what I've just defined you by finishing level 2 is the entire authentication industry. So every vendor has level 2. Most of them have level 1 by now, though we started level 1, so we invented the push authentication a long time ago, but most of them now have level 1 too. But that's it. It's what I call the playground of authentication. Everyone plays around in this playground. What differentiates people, vendors from other vendors, is what else do they have. In our case, as you can see, we have a couple of levels more than the basics, let's say. Now, I'll start by explaining level 2.5. Level 2.5 is still level 2 in our opinion. It's just a biffed up in terms of security level 2. Why? Well, if I steal your key fob token physically, so if I have a way to stealing it from you, and I already have a username and your password, which is not too difficult being static to get or to actually crack, then all I need to do is click the token, and that's it. So I need to press a button, and I've used the token that I've stolen from you. Now, if you use our credit card tokens, so the banking tokens that we talked about, those have a keyboard, and the chip has intelligent features. So it won't actually work. It won't give you a token unless you add a PIN to enable it. So if I steal that card from you, it will be rather pointless for me to have that card if I didn't know the PIN you were using to unlock the card in the first place. So I can't really steal the token from you and then generate a valid token. The second thing that this allows you to do is OCRA. So that's clearly banking industry, but it allows you to perform OCRA on the card. This is pretty important because most OCRA implementations I've seen out there are via SMS, and they are still hackable. So the banking industry decided to go for OCRA because it was a way to avoid hacking of the typical token. However, implemented over SMS, it's still hackable. It's pretty easy to hack, actually. And as such, it's not safe. In our case, we implemented the credit card tokens, and as such, it's the card you pay your lunch with every day that you use to generate those OCRA numbers for your banking wiring. There's another thing, which is if you use those tokens for employee access, depending on the type of lock technology you have, we can have the data that is sent over MyFairlight, for instance, to be bogus unless the PIN is entered, meaning that if I steal your employee card, and if it is one of these 2.5 level cards, without the PIN on the card, I wouldn't be able to go through the door because the data being sent by MyFair protocol won't be the correct one, for instance. Now, level 3 is our patented technology, PINsafe, that most of you should know of by now. But essentially, in a nutshell, PINsafe is a extraction protocol. So a user has a PIN, which exists in his head, and yes, the user can change the PIN, and we can have rules around what type of PIN you have, a complexity, size, etc. But let's, for the sake of the exercise and manage, you have a 4-digit PIN, which you never type. It's always in your head. And every time you log into the system's going to present you, and as you can see here, for instance, a small Turing image in this case, or a set of numbers, a randomization of numbers and letters, or just letters, that will require you to have a challenge of authentication. Now, what you're going to do is use your PIN as an extraction protocol. So the number on your PIN represents the place or the placeholder of the chain that is sent to you. If your PIN is 1, 2, 3, 4, it means the first, the second, the third, and the fourth character of whatever the system just sent you, and that's your reply to the challenge. Consequently, what's going to go through the wire is your username, your password, and then a digestion of the PIN as per the image that was displayed to you on screen. So and that's worth for one time only. So you never really type the PIN. A keylogger will not work. A man-in-the-middle attack will not work because your PIN is never written on the system. Now you can apply this to pretty much anything which has code control over it. So your own website, your VPN SSL, if it is configurable page like most of them are, or you can actually use our Windows credentials provider and add this to your Windows. And that's pretty important because most hacks today work around having a foot in the door, which means that having access to someone's computer inside the network. And since typically that person has access to the main controller because it needs to authenticate every day, it's then using that machine that was hacked as a front gun to the real attack. And that typical real attack goes through RTP so that they can access the server and create a bogus username and password, or essentially just manipulate accounts that they've stolen. Now, while stealing those accounts and RTPing, etc., we can certainly have a very real scenario laid out for you if you want any further information on this. But typically within those hacking scenarios, the stealing of credentials is a point, one of the hoops in the attack, and it's pretty easy to actually accomplish. But if you're using two-factor authentication with our Windows credentials provider, for instance, or even multi-factor authentication, it's pointless to grab that username and password because there's still a second factor there that you need to enter with a Turing image, for instance, or any other factor actually. So Windows credentials provider can work with any factor you see here. Now, level 3, as you can see, is way beyond what level 2 allows, and we had customers move away from level 2 because you can steal a token and use that token on behalf of the victim, but you cannot steal a piece of his brain that contains the PIN and interpret that and use that. So there's a big difference here between level 2 and 3 in terms of security. And this is, again, our patented technology that differentiates from everyone else. Now, there's also level 4. What is level 4? Well, it's fusing level 2 and 3 together. It is an SMS, but includes the PINsafe technology. So if someone steals this SMS, someone hacks this SMS, they still need the PIN to decipher it, and without the PIN, it's rather pointless. Same thing with the mobile app. Someone steals 99 tokens cached on your phone. It's pointless. You need the PIN to decipher them. So you've stolen 99 tokens. Good for you. Without the PIN, it's just gibberish. And we can also use the next one in this scenario. So a Turing image is presented on screen, and then you would need to reply via DTMF to a phone call that would happen to your phone. So there you go, another factor. Now, level 5 is MFA. And we have this essentially laid out here because it depends on scenario. But we do have MFA scenarios. For instance, if you think about MFA, what is MFA? Well, MFA is, if you think of it, either the presentation of several different methods that randomly are chosen, and you've got no control over them, or who's going to show up in terms of methods, which one is going to be selected by the system now for you to log in which case you need to have control over all, and as such be the real person trying to log in. Our other option is grabbing them together into sort of a chain. So you need to go through one point to the other one, which is what we actually call MFA+. But essentially, that's it. So it's chaining several methods together. And as such, let's go back one slide. If you look at all the offer you have here, and again, not all methods are here. If you look at the offering we have here, we have more methods than anyone else. And as such, you can have more and better myriad of options in terms of MFA. So yeah, we do MFA. We do MFA better than all of them, actually, unless they have PINsafe, which they don't. And this is an example of MFA. So this banking card you see here is actually Okra card, so you should be able to input the account number and the amount you're going to transfer. But there's no buttons. There's no buttons because it's going to be controlled via Bluetooth over a mobile app. And in order to access that mobile app, you'd need to pass through a Turing challenge, for instance. So attacking this net banking means stealing username and password. That's an easy one. Having actual physical access to the phone without the victim knowing, not so easy. Having actual access to the card that the victim uses to pay for lunch every day, and have them two side by side because it's low power voltage, low power Bluetooth. Having the PIN to decipher the Turing image to unlock the app that's going to generate the numbers on the card. Consequently, it will be very difficult to perform this hack. In terms of Windows, we have MFA for Windows with our Windows Credentials Provider implementation, also called AuthControl Desktop. And in that circumstance, essentially what you do is you use a fingerprint reader, for instance, and you don't have to input the username. The username is replaced by a biometric hash. And as such, everything which is challenges that come from that are already controlled via biometric hash. And so what is presented on screen, you need to challenge to, has been locked to your biometric signature, let's say. And you can use that not only with your fingers, but you can also use this with the Palm Secure from Fujitsu, so the Fujitsu palm reader, which reads the vein pattern on your hand or feet, actually. And essentially, you can use that as the biometric hash. So we do have MFA. It's a question of looking into the use case scenario and essentially playing that. We actually have a very good demo for the banking industry with MFA for a banking scenario. Now, the single sign-on RBA core, well, it actually allows you to have three ways to use. So you can use portal access, so ID provider initiated communication, or service provider when you go directly to the server, to the service that you're trying to use. So you go straight to the VPN, and then the VPN redirects you to this page. Now, this can be controlled in terms of publication. So you can have everything there, as you can see here, or you first need to input your username, and consequently, the system's going to allow you only to use the apps that your group was allowed to, for instance. So there you go. It's a direct or controlled publication. But it's pretty simple. You just access one entry point, being inside or outside the company. And as you click within those boxes you see on screen, you'll get single sign-on, but with risk-based authentication behind. Now, that risk-based authentication behind the scenario is essentially working with several different entry points, and this is an example of those entry points. So you as a company decide your risk appetite. So your 365 needs at least 100 points of authentication to be able to be accessed. Google Apps 60 points, Salesforce 160, and VPN, since it goes straight to your core network, 200 points. So this defines your risk appetite, and just numbers. You can have 10 points instead of 100. It's a number, okay, a scoring number. And then you're going to give or remove points based on this scoring model. So if communication comes from the LAN, you trust it, so you give 50 points. If it is a managed device, a device you know, you trust it, so you give 40 points. However, if it's a communication coming from Pakistan and you have no one there, it's just weird that someone's trying to connect from Pakistan. So minus 100 points there. So you can give away or remove points depending on the scenario. Now, whenever you don't have enough points from the given scenario and you need those points to access the entry point, the delta is calculated and you fill those points within the delta with authentication factors. So here's one scenario for you. I'm an employee from the company. I'm working within the LAN with the desktop from the company. So I have 50 points for being on a LAN, 40 points because I have a laptop from the company, and I've just logged into the system with username and password, so I've got 10 points recently. So I now have 100 points. As I try to access 365, the system's going to say, you need 100 points, but you already have them, so I'm not going to bother you, and it performs a single sign-on, as the user loves. Now, If I close the lid on the laptop and go home and attempt exactly the same thing a few hours later, I will no longer be on the LAN. Consequently, I will not have enough points. So the system's going to stop me as I try to access. It's going to redirect me to a page where I'll need to use one of the methods described here that gives me at least 50 points. So in this case, I'd have to go for the mobile app for 90 points, gain those 90 points, end up having 140 points, and as such, the system would immediately single sign me on to 365. And this essentially allows the system to behave from pure single sign-on and transparent mode into not even allowing you access. It will request stronger and stronger methods according to risk that actually is defined by you, the customer, and risk that actually is your definition of your risk appetite regarding your digital perimeter. No one knows this better more than you. And so essentially, which methods can we use to gain points? Well, pretty much any one of the methods I've shown you before. This is a simple list of this. So from pin pad, username and password turing, SMS, push, biometric if using the Windows credentials provider option, mobile app, auth token, or even the pic pad, which is a picture pad that we have, which makes the pattern on screen sort of a story, which abstracts things even further. So for the user, it makes sense to click a bunch of pictures with a sort of a story. It makes sense. But for the hacker, that story makes no sense at all. It's just completely abstract, and it's even harder to hack, essentially. Now, we also have MFA chain, which is actually something you can call military grade in terms of security, because what you see in the military area today is you need to go through several checks before you get cleared. And this is essentially what MFA chain or MFA plus allows you to do. For instance, you need to use push and then turing and then username and password. And if you do all this, not one or two, but all of them, then you get 500 points, for instance, to be able to access the entry point. Now, there's also something important, which is the logic rules we can use. So we talked about a couple of them. They actually mean IP range. Instead of the LAN, it's IP range. And known IP is a comfort rule, so it gets your last IP where you logged in and enables you to have some points if that IP didn't change within 24 hours and you log from that again. Group membership, service being accessed, time of day, having an X509 certificate, so that machine being from the company, physical location or geo IP, and then geo velocity, which means you've logged in from one place and 10 minutes later you're logging in from a far side of the planet. It's impossible, and as such, it should fail. But this is essentially basic, simple rules. The most powerful one is called the compound rule, and enables you to have something called parametric intelligence. So again, what's the buzz on the market? Artificial intelligence. Everyone talks about it. However, if you know anything about AI models, you know they are based out of statistics. And as such, an AI will consider the good and the bad scenario, meaning that by design, it will suffer from naiveness, and consequently, it will fail until it learns. Now, it's very interesting to use that on a controlled environment, but if you're using this to control the access to your systems, is actually a pretty bad idea. That means you're going to be handing over the keys to the kingdom to a 3-year-old that's still learning. It will eventually learn, but until then, it'll fail. And one breach is bad enough in security, isn't it? So what we worked on is essentially what a parent would to a child. That what parents do is teach their child. So they give them parameters for them to live on intelligently. And that's what we've done. So parametric intelligence is using that compound rule chained into new rules using logic. And then you can create complex intelligence scenarios like this, for instance. I'm not giving you 50 points just for being on the LAN. I'm going to check if your LAN is actually within the range of IPs from our Lisbon office, and also the user should be at that office. It's a user from Lisbon office. And also the time of day is the time of day you should be at the office. Then I'll give you 50 points. Because if it is 4 a.m., so and not within range, it makes no sense you be in the office, so you have minus 200 points and good luck authenticating them. Or it could be someone that really is from the office, but it's not within the office. It's someone that has travels a lot. So I'm looking for the XR1 certificate on that machine to recognize the machine is ours, and I'll give you only 20 points for that. And the same thing can be done with entry points. For instance, user group is someone from sales, and it's accessing Salesforce. So it should be someone from sales accessing Salesforce. That's good. And it's also from the IP range of our Madrid office where sales are. But it could also be someone from sales traveling. So if not this, then the XR1 certificate. So or. And then obviously we can have a scenario with security which defines and teaches the system how to understand risk appetite within parameters. So it will be intelligent, but you will still be creating this cushion of parameters. Now to finalize, I'll just briefly talk, I'm a little bit over my time, let's talk briefly about the cloud as disaster recovery. So essentially, cloud doesn't have to be full on or full out. A lot of people think either you go cloud or you don't go cloud. Not exactly. I perfectly understand customers that require authentication to be on premises. I understand that. I can actually relate to that. But I can also understand customers that want everything easy and on the cloud. But you don't have to go full into cloud and full out of cloud. You can use the cloud for something, even if you think that on premises should be the way to go. For instance, any disaster recovery site has a tremendous cost. And cloud could be a way to reduce this cost, an easy way to reduce this cost. And typically, it will require you to have infrastructural security and resilience in-house if you have something outside, right? However, in the cloud, you have that as a service. So the cloud provider already has teams of people that do nothing but look at security logs and try to essentially, try to avoid hackers through, for instance. And obviously, the machine existence could be geo-controlled. So you could say, yes, but I want the machine to exist within EU. Well, we can do that. It's not a problem. Or within the UK, or within Ireland, or within Japan. We have customers with that sort of demand, so that's another possibility. And obviously in terms of data centers, we all know that cloud providers, the big ones at least, have state-of-the-art data centers, and they have a great and tremendous investment into them, way better than any company would be able to. And this would be then a scenario of a cloud DR. So you can have the machines running within your infrastructure independently of how complex the scenario is. You can then just establish a VPN tunnel into your DR machine on the cloud and have everything mimicked in your DR machine on the cloud. And then as long as you establish your DNS register to have a higher TTL for the cloud, for instance, and round robin for that, if this site goes down, just because internet went down or because something actually happened here, you can immediately divert authentication through the cloud into your DR and still have a functional system with secure two-factor authentication to access it. So we are offering the cloud as a DR because of this. It's a way to have a better offer to our customers. So this is it. Thank you very much for being with us. And if you have any questions, please send them through now.